Good evening, people. Welcome to Youth Views. We are live on YouTube. A much anticipated subject area that we promoted and highlighted earlier in the week. And you can see the caption on the screen just below, The Lies of Boris. And as I say, we are living in much precedented times at the moment where there is more entertainment in politics than your average soap show on the television. I just want to introduce everybody. We plan to have a few more of our young people, enthusiasts in politics, and hopefully some of those individuals will join us a little bit later on. But first of all, I want to introduce a good friend of mine, been on a stream before with us, known as Cooperman257, but also known as John. John, how are we doing?
Hello, let's see, Youth Views. It's a pleasure to be on your stream, and this time a full-on stream as I arrived late last time for the previous one.
I know. And I feel gutted that we had to sort of cut that one short, but hopefully we can go the distance today, John. But brilliant to have you on. We also have with us Callum. Callum, we've had you before as well on Youth Views. Callum, how are we doing, mate?
Oh, a little tired.
A little tired? Oh, well, listen, you need to pucker up a bit because we've got some real controversial stuff we'll be talking tonight. Maybe take a Red Bull or something. Cameron, how are we doing, mate? Cameron, we see Cameron here, but I'm not quite sure if Cameron's mic's working, but we'll try and get Cameron on a little bit later. We have got others as well. I've just got my computer screen open in front of me as well, that are due to join us later. But without further ado, let's just get into it then, guys. And listen, first of all, thank you very much for joining us on the stream. I don't know what happened there, but bit of an issue with sound. Right. The lies of Boris Johnson, that's the subject area tonight. And as I say, we're living in some really entertaining public, sort of entertaining times in politics at the moment. We have at the beginning of this week the move from the current government in place, the Conservative Party. They're just about governing, I would say, if you allow me, with this big issue of Brexit at the moment. And we have the move that Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, who has come in and talked about being bold in his moves and politically really, really sharp. I think bold and sharp are two words to describe what is going on at the moment. And we certainly have a bold move when at the beginning of the week, it was broken around this news about proroguing Parliament, which we will no doubt touch on a little bit later. And so what we then learned is that actually this railroading style of politics wasn't just something that was being considered during their sort of Conservative election campaign, if you want to call it that, but actually it's the real deal. There was also some bullets fired, as other streams have covered earlier in last week's stream, around what the opposition parties are doing. And really what we have is at the moment this massive vacuum of those who are perceived to, let's say, be stopping Brexit. And then we have Boris Johnson and his camp that are absolutely doing whatever they can to make Brexit happen, even if it comes at the expense of no deal. And later we'll be discussing no deal and the potential consequences of no deal. But let's say the media are reporting that it could be catastrophic. So that's what's going on at the moment. We have then towards the end of this week, we started with the proroguing suspension of Parliament. Then we have then heard, I think it was a little bit earlier today, Michael Gove came on to, I believe, the Andrew Marr show on BBC. I won't swear too much on this show, so I'll only say BBC once. But I believe that he was on BBC where actually he's talking about ignoring any potential legislation that the opposition comes up with. So there's a lot of political sparring going on. But what we wanted to do today was, keeping those items and the context in mind, discuss a little bit around the lies that our Prime Minister has told. Now, we could write a book. We could have a 5-hour stream on this, but we're going to do our best to keep this within an hour. John,
Yeah.
just want to bring you in first, my friend. I mean, the 300 and when it's certainly with the context of what's going on at the moment, the lie around the 350 million pounds that would go to the EU if we were to Brexit, that seems to be one of the ones that sort of really, really significantly pick up when we talk about Boris Johnson and his very recent lies. We'll discuss a few others later. But talk to us about this 350 million. What's the background behind that, John?
From what I understand, the whole 350 million bus thing was an attempt to say that, we gave the EU 350 million pounds when we could have given it to the NHS.
So now, I don't know how much. This is in the referendum campaign, wasn't it, John?
Yeah, that was the referendum campaign. And from what I understand, depending on who you ask, it persuaded quite a few people to vote leave in the EU, depending on who you ask.
Yeah. And I believe from the little bit of research that I did before the show, the real figure, the official figure, was 289 million. And we understand that also when Boris Johnson was actually made aware and he was written to by the relevant authorities, what did he do? He continued to use the figure of 300. Well, it was on the bus, wasn't it, John?
Yeah. Granted,
can't exactly sign down, can you now?
Yeah, granted, you could probably argue that 289 is still a high number. Though granted, he probably just decided that 350 was a better sounding number for the campaign. After all, people tend to round up things like the 7-year war, which was actually only like 6 years and a few hundred days, but 7 years sounds better. So yeah, that might be why it was. But granted, yeah, he probably still lied. It might have been less damaging if he said 300, but let's see. But yeah,
what may have been, Callum, I want to bring you in as well at this point, is what may have been less damaging would have been, is it actually, if he'd have come clean during, after the campaign had started and said, guys, we've messed up, we've got the figures a little bit wrong here. Actually, the real figure is 289, but it's still a high number, and therefore there's still credibility in the argument. But Callum, he didn't do that, did he?
No, he told too big a lie to be able to roll back from it.
Well, why is this something part of Boris's character, or what?
Yes, he genuinely does not care about any other human being or any other institution other than himself.
Any other institution? I like that one. And I see Cameron has come off his mic as well. Cameron, how are we?
I'm good.
Thanks very much for joining us, mate. Thank you very much. Really, really pleased to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be on.
Great. So Cameron, we're just talking about this 350 million. This seems to be the most sort of well-known public sort of lie, if you like, that Boris has. I mean, let me just tell you personally, from my perspective, I think there's a great middle ground when it came to Brexit, and I think certainly this 350 million was a really, really. I know immigration was a big one. I don't want to harp on too much about the immigration, but this 350 million on the side of the bus was a really, really deal breaker for many people that I know that I may not have associated with the vote in Brexit around that time. Cameron, are you aware of anybody that voted leave because of this 350 million pounds to the NHS argument?
No, absolutely not. There's other reasons why people vote leave, and I don't. That's a deal breaker. I think immigration was a big thing.
It was
the state of the local area was a huge idea. If you look at the person that will leave, particularly the coastal communities, most of those communities have been declined for decades. In the last 10 years alone, most coastal towns have been in recession, and almost every coastal community in England, except Brighton, voted leave. I think there's much other reasons than the 350 million on a bus. I don't think that was influential as people think. And I think it's been, particularly by Remainers, saying it was a deal breaker. And I don't think it wasn't. was.
Okay, that's absolutely. I mean, if that's your personal perspective, then we're not here to push anything. This is exactly what we want here. Individual views, people telling us how it is. Certainly, from the people that I spoke to, there were a lot of people that said, actually, NHS, the publicity that they receive around the NHS, and the fact that it's been underfunded and etc., that was an argument. But we've got to remember that if you go onto Google and put Boris Johnson into Google, many of those pictures, Cameron, show that bus in the background. So it's heavily.
It doesn't mean that's the main reason they'll leave. That someone could have saw that and said, right, that's another reason because they're not giving money to a hospital. But really down to it, I don't think that's the number one reason. If you look at Poland, if you look at things like Poland on the issue, it's national sovereignty that comes up.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Is that not then another lie?
Yes and no, but the bus thing.
I agree.
The bus thing is over exaggerated. It
Yeah.
really, really is.
Okay.
Granted, I do know that.
Go on, John.
I don't know that many have tried to use the whole Boris lying for the NHS thing to try and take him down, but it seems to have any little effect on his reputation and popularity. Those that hate him still hate him, and those that like him still like him. Yeah.
And you're right, John. It doesn't change the fact that it was a lie, and that's what today's show is focusing on. Really, that our prime minister, our current prime minister, invented a figure or increased a figure, be it by 60 million, whatever, 61 million or so, in order to encourage people to vote in a certain direction. Now, you could argue that all politicians do this, and it's very interesting. Did any of you guys catch what the head of Channel 4 said about Boris Johnson? I believe her name's Dorothy Byrne. Last week or the week before last. Did anybody catch that?
We discussed it before.
That's right. On a previous stream, we did, didn't we? She basically came out and said that journalists shouldn't be afraid to call politicians dishonest, and she actually referred to Boris Johnson as a known liar, quote unquote. That caused a massive stir because obviously we know that it's unprecedented for a sitting prime minister to be openly called that. And I believe then, if correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, guys. I know a lot of you guys are faster with receiving news than ourselves, but then at the G7 summit, I believe Mr. Johnson then refused to do an interview with Channel 4. Am I correct there?
Yes, it was that thin-skinned.
Yeah. So, what does that tell us, Callum? What does that tell us then? I mean, look, if he's offended by that, do the interview. Surely the public is going to think, he's a liar because he's shying away from somebody who's called him out what he is.
He's not only a liar, he's also a coward.
He's a what?
Sorry. The Prime Minister is not only a liar, but also a coward. Okay. He's been accused of many things in his political career, but has been unwilling to defend himself because, for lack of a better term, he's too afraid of exposing himself further. The domestic violence row a few months ago.
Oh, yes.
He could have cleared it up immediately, but he strung it out by giving non-denials and other claims. And then when they released that picture, he was unwilling to say when it was taken. Boris Johnson doesn't just dig himself into a hole. He digs himself into a multi-layered trench network.
I like how you call that.
He is not only a liar, but when he is confronted with his lies, he proves himself a coward.
And does it not tell you something about the times that we're living in, though, Callum?
It's
completely.
John, you coming in there. Come on, what were you saying?
I think, let's see, yeah, unfortunately, yes, Boris Johnson is everything that is wrong with politics. Sorry, hearing noise in the background. Is that from my end or?
I don't think there's anything on our end here.
Okay, all right. So that's my mistake then. But anyway, but yeah, Boris is a well-known liar and he's a well-known opportunist. The biggest example you could do is when the EU referendum started. You have one. Let's see, you had him do 2 articles, one for Remain, one for Leave. So yeah, but then he took the Leave route for opportunities to try and probably get us to become the next prime minister. Probably took him a lot longer than he anticipated, but hey, that's because Michael Gove stabbed him in the back. But I think, but even though Boris is a liar, I think the biggest problem is during the last 2 decades, the public has, let's say, over time seen nothing but lies and deceit from our politicians. Let's see, one of the biggest examples is Tony Blair and the Iraq War. That
Yes.
would see that the entire interpretation of the public is all politicians lie, so it doesn't really matter. And they just don't see the difference. In fact, you could sometimes see someone that's more honest, like say Jeremy Corbyn, and compared to Boris Johnson, probably someone from the general public that doesn't pay too much attention to politics will probably just say that they're both the same, even though politically they are completely different.
That is a very good point, Cameron. I want to bring you in at this point. Is being truthful important in being a prime minister or a sort of significant politician?
Oh, being truthful should be important, but if you ask yourself, how many politicians and prime ministers have been truthful? There's not very many. Almost every prime minister that we had has lied on something. Boris Johnson lied on so many levels, especially when it was made of London. You go on the bridge and there's the water cannons like they are. The list goes on. So being Jewish should be important, but
Yes.
it's not important. And then because the media spins things in such a way, the truth doesn't matter, because what matters is your perceptions of things.
That's an excellent point. That is, Cameron. You're absolutely right. We haven't discussed too much about actually the responsibility the media have here, because okay, if he's come out with something mistruthful, the media then push it, the media pump it. Like there's 350 million here, right? Well, it was all plastered all over the media, so it was all pictured and talked about. But it's interesting as well. What I always say about the media is it's what they don't show is where the truths lie. So it's actually not necessarily lies about they showed this or they printed this figure or they stated this fact or non-fact, as it were. It's actually this. Let me give you an example. That what was that chap's name that got caught up in that where we manhandled that protest? Peter Field,
Mark Field, Member of Parliament for London and Westminster.
Yeah. Now that was massive news.
He physically assaulted someone.
Sorry, say that again.
He should have been prosecuted for
He literally assaulted a female with the clips going viral all over the internet. And
the fact that she was female is irrelevant. He assaulted a person. He should have been prosecuted.
Well, no, absolutely. But in this day and age, the fact that a male has insulted a female and there's been a clip that's been caught and going viral. Now, it was around the same time as Callum, as when you mentioned about the domestic
Also, I should
violence.
say that he was, interestingly, he was suspended by the May government, but the Johnson government gave him his ministerial job back.
And that's absolutely right. And we'll come on to that in a second. What I want to focus, though, Callum, here is just to try and sort of prove the point that I'm trying to make, that how soon then did we normal people, if we want to call us that, how soon was that stopped being pushed straight after that incident? I don't think it lasted more than even a week, did it?
No. The crying and the outrage lasted a few days, and then we all just sort of moved on to the next thing.
Exactly. Now, let me just ask this question. John, I want to bring you back in here for this one. Had that been Jeremy Corbyn or John McDonnell that had insulted that protester at that dinner, would we still be hearing about it now, or would it last in the same time as Mark Field?
Oh yeah, we would hear about it non-stop, saying there'll be demands of John McDonnell to resign as Shadow Chancellor if he did that. Not to mention, let's see, it's just something that always usually ends up happening with the Labour leader, particularly when he's particularly left-wing, is that you spend weeks or months, maybe even years on this particular issue, but when it comes to Conservatives, it'll only last like a week at best.
Yeah.
Let's see, unless it's something that even they can't run away from, such as when Theresa May botched the general election, her reputation sank and the media could no longer, let's see, give her excuses and stuff for most part, at least for an entire year.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that almost the entire print media and a decent chunk of the television and radio media is owned by Tories.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's connections there, isn't there?
No, it's not just connection. Many of the people who edit, write for, own newspapers, or work for Sky or other news channels are members of the Conservative Party, or give money to members of the Conservative Party.
There's a big crew. Absolutely. No, that's a good point. Cameron, I see you as my main Brexit expert, because I know we see your Twitter activity a lot about Brexit. The other lie that Mr. Johnson, by the way, does everybody know what Boris Johnson's real name is?
Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson.
So he's even kind of half lying about his name, isn't it? Because he should be known as surely Alexander Pfeffel Johnson.
Well, Boris Johnson sounds like a much more catchier name, really.
Absolutely. No, it's clever how they do it. Cameron.
He actually dropped his. Wait, just one thing. He dropped his surname. He dropped his first name at Eton. It was said that Al Johnson died in Eton, and Boris Johnson was born there.
Wow, interesting. Cameron, Brexit expert. What about this business about Turkey? Apparently, Boris said that another scaremongering sort of tactic, because I know you touched on immigration earlier, didn't you? So I thought I'd put this your way. He talked about if we don't leave, we'll have Turkey joining the EU. Shed a bit of light on that one, will you, my friend?
That's not necessarily true. Turkey is doing that application process to join the European Union.
Well, they have been for years, haven't they, Cameron? They have been for years.
And it's been
almost 2 decades, actually.
Yeah.
But Turkey do have a trade deal with the EU. They're in a customs union and they have an immigration deal.
Yeah.
But
their residents can't move into the more as far as sort of a German national could come to our country. Or a Lithuanian, they can't, can they? There's no freedom of movement for Turkey, is there?
They're not freedom of movement. They do have deals involving visas and migrants from Syria.
Yeah.
They have a loose agreement with the European Union on that. But the main reason Turkey's application is being on hold is because of human rights abuses by the President Erdogan.
Yeah.
While Erdogan's there, they will not join the European Union.
Yeah. So I mean that's unlikely to happen, right? But what we're sort of trying to focus on here, Cameron, is the lie that was told by Boris that Turkey, it was almost sold as if they're about to, and there's going to be floods of Turkish nationals coming onto our borders, as if we didn't have enough non-white or immigrants, whatever you want to call them, here already. That was a lie that was apparently told. Well, it was certainly animated and sold as something that wasn't the case, wasn't it?
It certainly was, and there was certain the process by fraud that they picked this lie. Yeah, Turkey was never going to join the European Union anytime soon. If it does, it will be in a couple of decades in the future.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, again, Channel 4 News. I mean, I'm not a great fan of the mainstream media, but I don't know what you guys think. I have to say that Channel 4 News is probably the closest mainstream to the truth as you will get. That a couple of months ago, around the same time as you remember the time when Theresa was about to resign before she stepped down. I believe that Boris Johnson was doing some speech at some manufacturing. I want to say JCB, but I can't be 100% sure. I want to say that, and there was a reporter from Channel 4 who'd said, "You said, Boris, that Turkey would be joining the EU, and you scaremongered around that." And I tell you what, he didn't half. I would love to, if I were using a different streaming platform, I'd be able to show that clip. It's a brilliant clip that we'll show that in the future. But it was a brilliant example, and even of Boris being tied into knots. And then even it showed the Channel 4 reporters walking after him, and he basically just took himself into a room. It was really comical.
The thing about Channel 4 News is, yes, it is probably the closest to the truth out of all of our major mainstream news networks. But the BBC seems to still have some special privileges. I don't know if you ever watched that documentary in which Laura Kuenssberg lured Boris Johnson into a pub or bar or something in Brussels, or
I haven't seen that.
It was. Yeah, she lured him into a bar, and basically they had a candid chat, which she secretly recorded, and then was put in a documentary. And it was basically, it showed that Boris, even as Foreign Secretary, was not committed to the deal.
Really, that's
one
interesting.
thing I need to credit the BBC for is that they're considered so harmless by the Tories that they sometimes let them into their den of iniquity.
I mean, I'm not particularly keen on Laura Kuenssberg, if I pronounced the name correctly, but I certainly think. Sorry, what's that?
Laura Kuenssberg.
I certainly say that the best of a bad bunch is Emma Barnett, Radio 5 Live.
I would say Andrew Marr's good.
Yeah, Andrew Marr as well to a certain extent, but Emma does give politicians on the left and the right a decent grilling. I still think that she's better than many of the presenters on LBC. I don't know if any of you've ever any of that.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Most of the LBC, journalists there are either right-wing or centrist.
Yeah. And the centrist ones, to be honest with you, annoy me more than the right. At least with the right wing, you know where they sit, you know where they stand.
You know where Nigel Farage or Ian Payne sit, but yes,
absolutely.
I can understand when it comes to Majid Nawaz or Aisha Hazarika.
Oh, don't swear on this show, please, Callum. Don't swear.
Don't forget James O'Brien.
Oh, James, don't even go there. James O'Brien is awful.
I talked to him the other day, and he seemed eminently reasonable, but a bit of a condescending bastard.
Callum, he will be reasonable at this moment in time if you are maybe a Remainer, and he's very pro-Remain. He will treat you very, very well, but he'll be extremely condescending if you were a Brexiteer. If let's say Cameron called up, right, he'd try and tie Cameron in knots. He would.
Don't forget, he'd also be extra tough on him since he's also a Corbynite.
He would. I tell you what, if he knew that, Cameron wouldn't get on his show.
Could I ask a question though? Just
Go on.
about the lies of Boris Johnson. Do you think the government is lying about sacking the Tory rebels? Because they've threatened to deselect up to 40 Tory MPs.
Right,
which would not just eliminate the majority, but would thrust them into 19th century level minority governments.
Yeah, this is where I sit on this, and obviously we'll get everybody else's views as well. What's that chap's name? Cummings, the advisor.
Dominic Cummings,
the real Prime Minister.
That's it, the real Prime Minister, Dominic Cummings, right?
The man responsible for the Leave campaign.
That's the chap. Yeah. Now I understand that He's a vile piece of work. And I think if we look at the story with these recent sackings, just give me a second, guys. We've got angels that have come in into the stream. Annabelle, how are we doing? Is Annabelle there? Annabelle will jump in, no doubt, when she's got her mic working. Yeah, so as I was saying, is that if we believe that to be correct in terms of the sacking of Sajid Javid's advisor, did everybody catch that story?
Some 27-year-old woman, right?
Hi.
That's right. That's right. Sarah Khan. Angel, is that you, Annabelle?
Angels is here. Well, she's muted at the moment, but hey.
She's just on mute. Okay, we'll let her come in.
All
when
right,
she's ready now.
Guys, I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm having sound problems, so I'll rejoin. Okay.
We can hear you.
I know, it's just that I can't.
Can you hear us?
Don't know why.
Just
give me join, okay?
Okay, brilliant. Okay. So yeah, I think if we believe that story to be true, which I think there's some good chance that it is true, that he sacked that advisor without advising the Chancellor himself, then I think that these
he
guys
sacked the advisor without reference to any elected official.
Yeah, well, it all leads.
He did it himself.
It's down to this alleged leak, isn't it? You know, this Yellowhammer leak.
Yes, I think he either the Yellowhammer leak was pinned on her or she did leak it, and so he sacked her. But he didn't go through the Chancellor. He didn't go through the Prime Minister. He just turned up to her and told her that she was gone.
That's correct. So in answer to your question, Callum, if it's the case that that is true, then I would say that there is a real threat of this deselection story. John, what do you think?
It won't surprise me that if he does, he wants to threaten. He wants to make sure that nothing gets in the way of stopping him from exiting the EU from, October 31st, and he'll do it by any means necessary. Granted, despite all the hysteria going on, from what I can tell, at least what I believe what Thomas has been telling in the Bullet Club, is that all the methods he does at the moment is currently legal, even if it's morally wrong.
Yeah. Well, we discussed that in the last stream with yourself and Callum. And Cameron, what about yourself? What's in answer to Callum's question, just to repeat it in case you didn't catch it, this business about Tory MPs almost being bullied into not rebelling and not signing.
Can I just say it is 40 MPs, including 20 former cabinet ministers, have been told that if they either abstain or vote against the government on anti-No Deal legislation, they will be deselected from the Conservative Party and removed from the whip, which means they will be forced onto the opposition benches, and the government would reduce its majority by 40. And I'm just reading from the Guardian that they intend to appoint over 100 peers to the House of Lords in order to vote because the House of Lords has the ability to delay legislation. It's called the ping pong.
Yeah.
Because the Lords pings back to the Commons, which pongs back to the Lords. The idea is that the Prime Minister is intending on appointing hundreds of Lords in order to prevent the Commons from sailing this legislation through.
And can they do that in time?
Yes, they can appoint Lords instantaneously. It will be quite a burden on Her Majesty.
They'll be walking out onto the street and handing out lordships then, won't they?
No, they can just go to anyone that will accept it. It's another way to get rid of Tory rebels, is you can just kick them upstairs.
Wow, and we're so-called.
I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up with people like Lord Ian Duncan Smith, or I don't know,
Branson.
David Cameron, Earl of Whitney.
Although he was, wasn't he? So I don't think he'd fit their criteria.
Yes, and another example would be taking John Redwood and making him a lord as well, or Anne Widdecombe, or Nigel Farage even. By kicking them upstairs as well, you could prevent them from causing damage in the Commons.
There's been talk of that. Just before I bring Cameron in to answer your question, let's see if we've got Annabelle back on. Annabelle, can you hear us? It seems as if sound is still of issue. While Annabelle is sorting that out, Cameron, just want to get your views on this deselection thing with the Tory MPs. Any truth in it, mate?
The problem is, because there's been deselecting attempts for the last year, or in conservative grassroots spheres, like Anna Soubry, before she left the Conservative Party, there were efforts to deselect her. There were efforts to deselect Nick Bowles before he became independent. So this wouldn't surprise me if the Conservative leadership, who is completely backed by the grassroots at this moment, is doing that. But I suspect MPs wouldn't vote with opposition. David Gort came out, I think, maybe a couple of weeks ago, and he said that he would never vote for a Jeremy Corbyn temporary government. No deal is better. And I think
he has changed his opinion today.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah.
Well, today he said the opposite.
Well, I'm not aware of that. Well, knowing what the Conservative MPs are like, and after looking at a lot of them activists even saying that they're rather of no deal than a common, common government, I suspect majority of Conservative MPs will vote with the government. Maybe someone.
Well, I can confirm that Philip Hammond won't.
Someone like Dr. Philip Lee would likely vote with the opposition, but the majority of those 40 MPs, they will vote with the government.
Philip Hammond and Ken Clarke are both committed to voting with the opposition.
I don't remember, but I think Ken Clarke will.
You've got to remember, some of these people are at the end of their political careers and standing down, so they've got nothing to lose, have they?
Yeah, that's mainly the case with Ken Clarke. I think it was like, if this was happening a year or two ago, I don't think he would have done it.
No, he would have. His intention was to retire in 2020 at any case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So these some of these people got. Well, look, I say.
May I? Sorry. Just to say one other thing about Ken Clarke was the reason he stood in 2017 was precisely to oppose Brexit. The only reason that Ken Clarke sees fit to remain in the House of Commons is to prevent a no-deal Brexit. And
I mean,
any Brexit in his own mind.
Yeah,
because
that's
he
fair
is. As we said, he's a principled Liberal Democrat.
Well, there's nothing principled about any Tory, but I think it's got to be said as well, not that I would be defending him in any way, that he did propose the customs union in the meaningful votes. So, I think he sees the middle ground to an extent.
Which is, ironically enough, the Lib Dems voted against it, and they want him as caretaker prime minister, even though he still wants to do the customs union thing.
John, you said Lib Dems, we don't swear on this show, my friend.
Sorry.
No.
That party founded in 1988.
Sorry, say that again, Callum. Didn't catch that.
To avoid swearing, that party founded in 1988.
Yeah, exactly. Or the yellow lot, we can say that.
No, their official colour is amber.
Well, granted, if you go to Scotland, they refer to them as yellow Tories.
No, maybe in some circles, but the Yellow Party is actually the SNP.
Sorry, say that again, Callum.
Well, the SNP are yellow and black. I've heard the SNP referred to their colours as bumblebee.
Yes, correct.
And I personally know both my MSP and my MP, both SNP, both bumblebee coloured, and they refer to the Liberal Democrats not as yellow Tories, but as basically right-wing Labour.
Yeah.
Because in this constituency, this is SNP versus Labour. And the Liberal Democrats are seen as basically a right-wing fringe in Labour. because unionism is largely split between Labour and Liberal Democrats on one side and the Tories on the other, and then the SNP sit as sort of the centre. And in fact, I don't want to get into it because I know it's not the subject of the stream, but something to discuss another time is the idea of the SNP as the centre of Scottish politics.
Yeah. Okay. We can certainly put that on the.
John would be a good guest on that show as well because he's Scottish as well.
Fair enough.
Dad, I'll be visiting my dad next week from the 4th to the 11th. So if you want to try and do a stream around then, I could ask him if he wants to join.
Yeah. No, that would be great. We'll definitely put it on the order paper. Let's bring it back to the subject a little bit, guys. Let's while we're on the subject of about lies and being dishonest, it became apparent. Let me bring you guys to the Conservative leadership campaign, where we had the likes of Rob versus Gove versus Javed versus Boris, and various others before them, before it got narrowed down. Absolutely, sorry, Hancock as well, I throw in there as well. Absolutely throwing this idea of proroguing Parliament being undemocratic and outrageous and impossible and never and almost using it as a pawn in the game that they were playing of chess. In, well, vote for me and I'll never do that. And then a massive coincidence when Boris inevitably won his prime ministerial or leader of the Conservative Party position. And it just so happened that these characters who were opposed to proroguing and the suspension of Parliament then happened to find themselves in his cabinet. What is it now with them and their silence? Callum, I want to ask you this one first. What is it? What is it with their silence about the? Where are their morals now? Why aren't they moaning about the proroguing of Parliament now?
Anyone not moaning about the proroguing of Parliament doesn't care about parliamentary sovereignty. Does not care about the legislature.
Is it something about them being in a cabinet position, though, Callum? Is it something the fact that now actually they're in a cushy job?
Well, if you're in the executive branch of government, you will immediately see the legislative branch of government as either a facilitator for your aims or a roadblock to your aims.
Yeah.
Because we live in a parliamentary government, because legislation has to be passed by the legislature, it means that if you're in the government, then you either, if you think that the policy that you're pursuing has a majority, then it's fine. Parliament is merely there to get your policy over the line. But if Parliament opposes the government's policy, then they're seen as a roadblock. And because this whole issue has been coached in terms of democracy, the government can say, we stand up for democracy. Parliament is standing against democracy. But going back to lies, the government, the very members of the government, said that this was restoring parliamentary sovereignty, giving power back to our sovereign parliament. But now they are suggesting that parliamentary sovereignty is the very thing getting in the way of what they call democracy, which I call tyranny of the majority. I don't know if you've heard of the Mogumentum, the campaign for Jacob Rees-Mogg. They were claiming that democracy was somehow a principle in which the losers gave in.
Yeah.
But that is simply the tyranny of the majority. Is, majority opinion ruling absolutely is not a democracy. It's a tyranny. It just happens to be a tyranny pursued by the majority of people. And in this case, the minority of people, the government, is pursuing a tyrannical course of action. And their actions in respect to Parliament at this point are tyrannical. They're not. It's not a dictatorship. It's not a coup. It's entirely legitimate. But I would say that it would be wrong to say that it was tyrannical. Sorry, I would say it's wrong, and I would say it's tyrannical, but I wouldn't say it was illegal because it's not.
Yeah, and we discussed a lot of this on our last stream, didn't we? And John, I mean Amber Rudd. It was great when there was some news reporters that were running after her and asking her to comment, and then she was refusing to comment on this issue of proroguing Parliament. Why the silence for Amber Rudd and her mates now?
Well, let's see. If they answered, they have to admit that they, completely lied or they changed their minds.
Is she lying then, John? Is she lying? Is she a liar as well?
Probably yes. Granted, depending on what you think happens in the next election, you could see Amber Rudd losing her seat, though. That remains to be seen given the current polling, I guess.
She won it by about 9 votes, if I remember correctly. 2017, there was a recount, and she did win.
200 votes, I think.
Was it? I thought it was single figures. Maybe I'm mistaken her with somebody else.
I think that might be Zach Goldsmith.
Oh right, okay. Mm-hmm. So you would categorically say Amber Rudd, Sajid Javid, Matt Hancock, liars as well?
Well, that or they just opportunists, really. They just don't. They've got these nice, comfy jobs in the new Parliament, government administration, and they don't want to get sacked from it. So they're just ignoring the truth. Or
John, Callum's point earlier about them potentially being bullied.
Possibly held hostage. Let's see. Granted, it seems like any Tory rebels seems to be held hostage from the, creation threat of deselection. Sorry.
What I would argue, Cameron, I want to bring you in at this point as well. I would argue that Mr. Johnson is a compelled liar. I would say that he can't help and he has no filter, especially when he's on the public forum. And the example, Cameron, I want to give you is, again, just referring to his appearance at the G7 summit, where in an effort to, in a publicity stunt, one would call it, in an effort to cozy up to the Americans and say, you may have remembered about these Mowbray pork pies when he said, these are available in Thailand and Iceland, but actually we want to get them into America as well because they're not available there. And then, very famously, the very next morning on the BBC Radio 4, the actual chairman of that said company said, "We don't sell our pies out. We don't export out to Thailand and Iceland." One of the biggest lies is told in very recent believe it was last week. What's going on there?
As a consumer of Melton Mowbray pork pies, I must say that this is all very offensive.
Cameron, what are you saying? We lost him? Oh, we got you.
No. Yeah. Well, this is typical.
Is that another lie, Cameron? Is that something? I mean, I'm more interested in your answer to hear about. Okay, I think it's understood it's a lie. Can he help it? Does he know that he's lying when he's doing this?
I think.
Does he give a shit?
I don't think he cares. I think what matters to him is rhetoric, and that's all it matters. He does this all the time. I think once Boris Johnson went into the Conservative conference with a brick. I swear he did once. He's known for doing this. It's nothing new.
Yeah.
As I said this then, what matters to Boris is rhetoric and getting his message out. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's rhetoric.
I mean, it's not in my research notes, but I remember a couple of weeks before in the last days of his campaign, he picked up this fish. I can't remember the exact fish. Anybody jump in if you can help me with it. He picked up this fish and referred to the packaging of it.
I want to say herring.
Yes, it may be the case.
No. It was definitely a kipper of some kind.
It was a kipper of sorts. And he said he picked up this packaging, this fish. He literally brought it into one of the hustings. He picked it up and he said, "Look at the EU, how much red tape there is. and once we leave, we won't have to do this anymore. And then very, very smoothly,
the species of fish isn't really mentioned, but the point is that the Boris lied. He said that it was an EU regulation requiring kipper supplies to keep their products cool within ice pillows, but it was actually a UK regulation importing from the Isle of Man.
Exactly, and that's what is so
the actual
ridiculous.
Kipper he held up never entered any other EU country other than Britain. And the fact that he held the fucking receipt. You can actually see the picture. Boris not only holds the Kipper, but also the receipt. And the receipt would tell him that it was a British, or at least, or maybe a Mansk fish.
Just the attention to detail. Can you imagine though, like before that speech, him sort of getting there quite late and maybe in his erratic nature?
It's ridiculous, as Liz Truss saying we import 1/3 of our cheese, and that is a disgrace.
Yeah.
Or Boris's 2015 brick speech, in which he held aloft a brick throughout his entire speech.
The thing is, like, if there are so many good examples, and I'm sure Cameron may jump in here with, being the arch Brexiteer that Cameron is that there are so many good examples he could have used to prove his point. But I just could imagine him just in a bit of a frenzy before this speech, running into the local Sainsbury's or whatever, store that was close by, just picking out this thing from the freezer and taking it into his speech and then having it, in his pocket or something and picking it up. And then later realizing or being told that actually it was a whole load of shit, a whole load of bullshit.
Let's see. By the way, to go kind of off topic a little bit, let's see. What are your thoughts on the recent statement by Michael Gove of saying he would ignore any legislation passed to stop No Deal Brexit?
Wow. Yeah, I know. And it's in my notes. I was going to talk about it. I want to get everyone's views on this, really. It's a shame that, what's her name? Angel. Angels is not able to come in there, but we'll definitely get on the next stream. Listen, when I heard this, when you just think things can't get any worse, and they couldn't get any deeper or a worse level. Think shit just does. Do you know what I mean? And when Ma was querying him about this, what if this legislation is passed, and Gove was just basically, in as many words, saying we would ignore it. I actually am worried now. I mean, I have been worried for a while, but I am actually shitting it for the future of this country. What we have is, and I'll wrap my point up very quickly on this, is that we have now a populist form of politics that sees to ignore the rules of civilization it's Trumpism for me. That's what Trump does over there. For example, Trump's basically just willy-nilly tweeting out, right, we should cease trade with China because of X, Y, and Z, and it would be completely against any laws of trade or anything, but people would listen and adhere to it. It's a populist, in my view, it's a populist form of actually turning a whole group of people, 17.4 odd people, or around about that number, or attempting to turn them against the actual, not the establishment, but the real civilized rule of law and basic concept of sovereignty. The very things that they've been arguing for. It's a massive contradiction. The very things that they've been arguing for, of we need to make our own and be sovereign in our own right. Well, actually, these guys are killing that sovereignty, if that's a word. So that's my view on it, and I think it's very worrying. Callum, you want to go next on this?
I was about to say, first of all, sovereignty, yes, so you're correct to say sovereignty. Sovereignty is short for supreme authority, authority without any limits. Britain, first of all, is a sovereign state, and although it delegated some of its sovereignty to the European Union, it always had a say on those laws. In addition, populism is the last refuge of those disaffected by politics. I genuinely am just against populism in any case, and think that we should have a mixed form of government which combines the various talents of our whole country so that we don't have politicians governing for themselves rather than the whole people. And in the end, we're in a position where if the government succeeds in doing what it wants here, we will be forced into a much harsher form of politics than we are currently living in. And I do not know whether or not progress in this country will be able to be achieved legally. I'm not deliberately advocating revolution here, but I'm simply suggesting that it's possible that the future, next year and for many years after, might see a situation in which opposition to the government will not be able to be manifested in the ballot box, but will have to be manifested on the streets.
Yeah.
And
it's the only way.
Be there.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems right now is the opposition is so divided between the pro-Corbyn, the die-hard Remainers, and the centrists in many ways. Oh, and the Scottish nationalists. But see, due to that divide, it makes it very easy for Boris to climb up in the polls. Let's see, where it's, depending if you believe the current pollings, he's predicted to either have a small majority or a landslide, mostly because the polling from the other parties is so split that by default he wins.
Yeah, absolutely. And before John, we get your own opinion on this. I just want to ask what Cameron's views on this is. Cameron, have you heard about today's news where Gove has basically said that we may ignore any legislation that's made, and I just want to take your context around. I know you're a Brexiteer, and I know that actually, and I think we'll all agree with you here on this channel when we're talking that actually some form of Brexit should be delivered. There does seem to be this sort of actually we'll do whatever is needed as long as we do. It's almost like a double democracy here. Well, actually, we have to do this because the parliamentarians are not delivering Brexit. In the context of that, are you still worried, though, that actually ignoring such legislation may have problems for future generations and democracy in this country, Cameron?
Yes. I'm not that much of a Brexit than you think. And I don't agree with the government's doing, how it's approached to Brexit. The issue that we're having, though, is that referendum created a new precedent in a democracy. It created an unofficial layer in our constitution.
It did.
That was, and I think that should be called the sovereignty of the people.
Yeah.
And like it or not, and there is a battle of ideas, whether there's the quote-unquote sovereignty of the people, the sovereignty of Parliament. And
well, the problem is, Cameron, that ideally the sovereignty of the people would trump the sovereignty of Parliament, but because of the current constitutional settlement of the country, we're forced into a situation in which the sovereignty of Parliament does trump the sovereignty of the people. To change that, we must change the relationship of the people to Parliament. And because no legislation can be passed, unfortunately, I think we're going to have to accept the sovereignty of Parliament, at least for a short period of time, unless there is a popular revolution. So either we have a revolution or we have to accept Parliament's continued jurisdiction for the time being.
What do you think about that, Cameron? Revolution?
Well, there's unlikely to be a revolution anytime soon.
It's a shame, isn't it?
Are we not heading in that direction, though, Cameron? Look at the weekend. I know that the media won't shed too much on it, but there's been tens of thousands of people out on the street. Surely that's heading in some direction, mate.
There was times in our recent history where there were more people on the streets and nothing happened. Think of what happened before the Iraq War. Think what happened in the 80s. Think what happened in the poll tax rights. think about what happened in the 1920s, 1926 general strike.
You could even go to the 1919 Glasgow Revolution, in which Scotland nearly broke away from the United Kingdom as a socialist republic. It was only put down by the military.
Let's see, which I believe...
If they had not intervened, Scotland might well be a socialist republic, a la the Soviet Union.
By the way, out of curiosity, was Churchill the one that ordered that, let's see, thing?
Churchill was, I think, Minister of State for War at the time, or something to that extent, and was in charge of some of the military resources, but Lord George was the Prime Minister.
I see, because I do...
But the coalition government was so concerned they locked Scottish troops in their barracks and sent up troops from Catterick to intervene and prevent popular revolution in Glasgow. However, one thing to remember is that all of the protests were non-violent. It was only when the police and then the army opened fire did the protests become violent. But the move of Scots at the time was to become a socialist republic. And the point is, I would say that was the last time in which British politics was as fevered as it is now. That and maybe 1926.
Anything can happen, guys, at the moment. The way things are going is it's not taking us by shock at all. And obviously it's all about watching this space, really. What can we do? What can you guys do? We can join together. We can lobby. I think I was speaking on a stream with Lauren. Some of you know Lauren, I believe, 17-year-old Lauren, last week, and we had a discussion about so much infighting within the left movement, within the socialist movement, young people against other young people, and young people are the future. This is about bringing and channeling your energies together to fight this, and we can fight this, but it's going to really need sort of coherence, smartness. It's going to need us to align, despite our differences, align the arguments that democracy comes first. And I think we probably would all agree that Brexit has to be delivered here. There is no way that we can allow. I mean, I will be very open and say I voted Remain. I stand by that. But there was a referendum. There was a result. Yes, some of that stuff was based on lies, but actually manifestos tell lies. Political parties come into power on the basis of lies very often. Does that mean that they shouldn't be elected in? Well, that's to be. So I think just a final issue before we do wrap up, guys. Johnny, when I come to you, is Brexit. What's over the hill with this? What could happen now moving forward as we stand?
Well, it seems like the most likely scenario is a no-deal Brexit because the Tories need to do that as a do-or-die moment. And if they either do an extension, let's see, or maybe even a soft Brexit sorts, they could see the momentum they've been gaining since Boris has become, let's see, PM, going back to the Brexit Party, and they may die out as a party, at least for a decade or something. I don't know. Let's see. But yeah, honestly,
Will Johnny, anything of this have the fact that Boris is, and as we've discussed on this stream today, the fact that he's a known liar, I think we can call him that, a known liar, in any election, will that characteristic have any standing?
Let's see. I fear that if he does...
Wait, may I? It will
shed
voters to Liberal Democrats, that's all.
Sorry, say that again, Callum.
It will shed Tory voters to Liberal Democrats.
You think?
Unfortunately, yeah, because I don't see, let's see, Senator Tories like Mr. Fielding in the side chat here going to Corbyn because they think he'd be a disaster for the economy and stuff like that. they don't want any form of socialist government or social democracy government taking form. So yeah, let's see. So unfortunately for Labour, let's see, trying to appeal to like Tory Remainers or even some of the more right-wing Lib Dem Remainers isn't really going to work at the moment. The best bet is to try and get people on the left-leaning, be it from the Remain side or even the Leave side, to come in and vote for vote for them in order to try and get them to either have a small majority or even become the largest party. But unfortunately, since they've been pressured so much to go from the Remain by some of their own members, MPs, and even people outside the party, that they've sort of gone down this sort of semi-Remain-like thing, and it's sort of cost them a bit in the polling at the moment, from the looks of it. Granted, it's possible, though, that they could gain more polling come a general election, but how much, I'm not sure, and whether or not it'd be enough to stop the Tories.
Okay.
Can I be terribly unpopular? I think that we should remain in the European Union.
Okay.
When the vote in 2016 resulted in Brexit, I thought perhaps it would be a good idea to pursue a deal. Once the deal was reached, and especially after the deal was rejected, I thought it was best to remain in the European Union, because I think that the impact it would have on the majority of people, the union between England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and on society would be a long-term detriment, and that if the choice was leaving, I would not protest if we left with a deal, but I would protest if we left without a deal, because if we left without a deal, then we can kiss the union goodbye, and we can kiss financial security goodbye, and we can kiss tens of thousands of people's lives goodbye.
Okay. Cameron. Oh, sorry. Go on, Johnny. Final word.
Let's see. Now let Cameron speak. So
I was just going to say, Cameron. Callum talks about remaining in the European Union for the sake of the economy and lives. What do you reckon?
Well, I also we shouldn't remain in the European Union, but we are in an extremely difficult situation. The direction that Boris Johnson would take this country in, it won't be a positive one. Especially what we do after no deal, with a potential trade war in the United States.
If we leave without a deal, we can't get a trade deal with the US because of the House of
The island issue.
I think the America is finding around it, not knowing the Republicans and Trump. But and they already have a trade deal on paper. Apparently, there's rumors that they already made agreements in private, especially after the G7 meeting.
There goes the NHS.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Potentially, yeah. At best, they'll just America will just buy the PFI contracts, but the worst case scenario, it will get privatized even more. And that's right. Now, I don't like the European Union at all. Its conduct, how it's structured, how it works, how the direction that it probably will go in the future. To me, it's a very difficult choice to make. My position, for the most of this debate, is actually join EFTA. But
it's been talked about, hasn't it, lately? Well, it's been talked about for a while, but it's resurfaced, hasn't it, after?
Unfortunately, due to the fact that Remainers rejected it at first, it seems like it's too late to bring it back. But go on, Cameron.
I'm very skeptical about polling, but recent polling suggested this. The support for a suspect deal is actually going up.
That's correct.
Among unleavers. So I hope we might get. I don't like them, man. But we get a Stephen Kinnock style compromise at the end of this. Because I think that's what this country needs. If you look at, I've read some articles recently suggesting that families are not talking to because they voted certain ways in the referendum. In fact, I could link you one later. And how it turned people apart is absolutely horrible. And either extreme on this is going to make that worse. So that we need to go to a compromise, and that's all I have to say on that. If we remain, it will cause enormous social problems. I know what Farage said. I mean, Farage is never a lie, but he said things like, "I'll pick up a rifle if we don't leave the European Union."
He might not, but others will.
I seriously think there will be mass social unrest for a very long time. I'm not probably on the scale of France, what we've seen over the last week.
Yeah, there's potential in it, definitely. Oh, guys, listen, you guys have been great. I just want to wrap up on this. I've just
May I make one last point?
Yeah, go on, Callum. Sorry, you were saying.
I have to admit, remaining in the European Union is the neatest possible economic and political solution. But when it comes to social solutions, an extension leading to a soft Brexit deal would probably be the best for society, wouldn't damage the economy anywhere near as much as no deal, and might just hold the union together, and might well be the best solution, even if it's not the neatest one.
Okay.
So I would say Cameron is right, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to remain. I think that the closest thing to reality is no deal.
I want to just stress what James Jordan has said. It is put in the side chat. Is May's deal not a soft Brexit deal? Now,
No, it's not.
I'm going to admit something here. And a lot of people spun it as a soft Brexit deal.
Yeah.
I did to a bit as well. A lot of people did because of all the hype in the media, and it was foolish to do. If you look at what the deal actually offers, potentially it could offer a hard Brexit. I kind of the style deal when the backstop disappears, but May's deal was a form of hard Brexit, and she did try to compromise, even though it was a poorly put together.
The Tories never pursued a soft Brexit. They never would.
Partly because it would be seen as a betrayal by their voter base.
Yeah.
And UKIP voter base that they tried to galvanise.
Well, this was the big threat. Guys, I just want to read this tweet that's been sent by Beth Rigby of Sky News. I'd seen it in one of the groups. And I just want to sort of wrap up now. We've gone over an hour, so I just wanted to sort of wrap up on this. The Tory minister texts, "They've all gone nuts. This is going to be a mind-bending week, which could destroy the Tory party. This government and test our political and constitutional conventions to breaking point. It could even end in a general election." I'll put that on screen as well so that we can see it. Just final thoughts on this now. I mean, this is an inside Tory minister who's talking about the current executive, saying that they've all gone nuts.
If that Tory minister has enough balls, he would resign right now.
Yeah.
But let's see. But Tories don't really have the stomach to crash out their party, especially when the leader of the opposition is as left wing as it's been since the 1980s.
Yeah. Cameron, any balls in these guys or not?
Sorry, could you?
Yeah, I'm just talking about the text that Beth Rigby of Sky News has tweeted out, saying that basically they've all gone nuts, talking about Boris's crew, Boris's lot. They've all gone nuts, and basically this could potentially destroy the Tory party. Just final words on this one, really, Cameron.
Mate, I think Boris Johnson, as united the Conservative Party, not destroyed it. If Boris is successful, then the Brexit party, much of the Brexit party support base will go to the Conservatives. It might do the opposite. It might actually make the Conservative Party much more powerful. Much more working class base, which is quite worrying. So
worried for the Labour Party, isn't it? Worrying for the Labour Party.
Well, especially when you're in a constituency that it's quite Eurosceptic. Labour's been in the climb for a while, and after push, people could flip.
Yeah.
Well, arguably, Labour has been in decline in many constituencies since 2005.
Yes.
Mostly,
So 15 years.
Mostly thanks to New Labour taking for granted their voter base at the time.
No,
The situation in Scotland.
No, Labour here has been in decline since the defeat of the Miners.
Since 1987?
Yeah.
Yeah. I went up. Vote share stagnated after
30
that.
years.
Vote share only went up in slightly in 92 and 97, but it's been largely in decline.
Excellent, guys. Listen, I want to say thank you to all of you for coming on today. I think it's been a great stream. We've really discussed the subject matter, which is the lies of Boris, the lies Boris tells, rather. We've discussed lots and lots of circling issues around that, but bringing the context of him and the Conservative Party and the current government executive at the moment as well. But as you know, tomorrow and the next few weeks are going to be absolutely entertaining times. And what I want to do is ask you guys and all of our viewers and anybody who wants to get involved to basically tweet us at Youth Views, and that's Youth Views. It's on the screen now with a Z on the end. Let's get involved in the debate. Let's have lots more of these streams because we may never see times like this again. It may get really boring again. Who knows? One thing about the times, the political times at the moment, that at least it is entertaining. But I want to thank each and every one of you for coming on today, and I want to thank everybody who is watching us or who will watch this when it ceases from being live. We are a new channel. We are striving to do better and become more professional, but we can only do that with the viewers' interests and your support. So please follow us on Twitter, like the content, and subscribe to the content as well. I've been Harry Khan. I want to thank John Cooperman257, my man Cameron, and Callum Ferguson for coming on and really making this an entertaining show. Yeah, go on.
One last point.
Go on.
Because I'm about to start a course in politics, I just wanted to say I'm about to begin University 1A introduction to British politics, and I think I might well be the luckiest person going into politics in the 21st century. I
agree. No, definitely. And a lot of this is going to be very useful for moving forward. So we do bring you on because you're the expert, though, Callum. So don't forget that, mate.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, guys, listen, thanks again for watching. Please stay tuned. Like I say, share the content because the more you like and share it, the more it gets onto people's YouTube feeds and gets our views up. I look forward to speaking to you all soon. Final goodbye from everyone.
Bye.
Ta-ta.
Take care. Cameron, see you later, mate.
See ya.
Okay, over and out, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Good night. God bless.
Mm-hmm.